Welcome back to another episode of the Epic Investor Podcast. My name is Jason Morris. I'm here with James Morrell and Rich Jarvis. Excited today to talk about the Silver Tsunami and what that means for you as an investor or even a potential owner, operator of a company. These opportunities that are coming at us in a huge way really provide a vehicle for wealth generation and creation. And I'd love to unpack that today as we talk about how you can be a part of that Silver Tsunami. So with that, let's get started. So guys, this topic for me is super exciting. It's one that I've followed for a little bit in the background of private equity and buying companies and sourcing those and going out and finding them. I'm really, really excited about, this next event. And I think every, generation kind of has its moment where people can take advantage of something, the onset of the internet, how people took advantage of those moments and could create wealth through those moments in time. I feel like this is, and then cryptocurrency hit, and people definitely got wealthy through crypto. I feel like this might be the next opportunity where people, if they know how to manage it and if they know how to wade through it and if they've got the right teams in their corner, gosh, I think people could really just change their stars at a legacy level, for their kids and their grandkids. Mm-hmm. But to get started, what is the Silver Tsunami? Let's define that for a second. And I think there's a lot of names and tags out there for the Silver Tsunami, but to give it a dollar figure, the economy is stating that there is a $70 trillion transfer of wealth that is already in motion, or it will occur, between this baby boomer era of business owners, service providers, that needs to shift into the hands of the up-and-coming generation. Now, business acquisition's not new. Buying companies from retired people is not new. But the reason they're calling it a tsunami is because of how many people are looking to exit their business in a very short period of time. And so it's going to feel super impactful into the economy. Now, to be honest, the part that really excites me is they're also showing that there's not enough backing financially where the banks can't come out and finance $70 trillion worth of these transactions. It's not available to the public, which means that we're going to get to be super creative in the way we finance deals. And I love being creative. I love getting down into the deals, and we can talk about deal structure later. But when I hear that there's going to be this opportunity or this pathway or even this norm, if you will, for creative financing and creative deal structures in order to support these people that need to sell their business, it tells me that a lot of people can get involved if they really want to. And you can get involved in a couple of ways. And so, the first one is talking about whether you should buy one for yourself or whether you should, work with a group that, already has proven systems and in place. And so the first thing I think of is I had this mentor growing up. I was 12 years old, and this guy that was one of my church leaders, he worked as an engineer forever. And, I always knew that he was at the office every day. And he'd come home every night, he'd be still in his work clothes when he'd have all these youth come over to his house for, some activity. And all of a sudden, he moved to California and bought a turf business. And I remember asking him, were you like an engineer in turf or an engineer in, synthetics or in rubbers, or like how did you jump over from engineering to owning a turf company in California? And I grew up in Arizona, by the way. So it was a move for them. They up and moved their 8 kids. Mm. And he said that he had his eye on wanting to buy a business, and that he had grown his 401k to a point where he could use the 401k as a down payment, and borrowed money from the bank and bought this company that he really liked in California. And at my young age, I didn't dive very deep into, the details of that, but I remember thinking, well, that's pretty neat that who I considered a general Joe Schmo beat his corporate America job by, getting into a position where he owned his own company. And I think that is probably the core or the essence of the benefit of the Silver Tsunami is people can go and get involved. So like I said, I get so overwhelmed by it. My second point is talking about how to drown out the noise. What's one of your favorite stores to shop in? Like one where you say to yourself, I could get in trouble here.
Cabela's,
Shields.
Cabela's, yeah. Shields. Any sports store, yeah.
I say that when I walk into a hardware store.
Costco.
Like, Costco's a bad one for me.
Yeah, Costco even. Especially when you can have lunch or something right on the way out. And
my wife actually won't let me shop at Costco without being on the phone with her because I'm the guy that goes down every single aisle.
Yeah, be there for 8 hours, hanging out, even in the sofas they're on display.
Years ago, I took my niece and my nephew to the candy store here in Eagle, and their parents are not. They don't typically like their children consuming lots of sugar, which most parents don't, but they were very like, let's eat fruit instead of gummy bears. Well, Uncle Jason comes into town and, I've got to be the favorite uncle. So I took him to the candy store and I watched these kids grab a basket and they filled everything they could have wanted, right? They were completely overwhelmed with what they were seeing and they knew their parents weren't around. And I walked in the house and, I got my scolding from my sister-in-law, rightfully so, and I knew it was coming. But it is easy when you walk into a Shields or any sports store or a Costco, and if you don't have like your list, if you don't have an idea of what you want, you tend to overspend. You tend to buy things you don't really need. You tend to justify, the TV that you just loaded onto the cart that you really didn't need, but it's such a good deal. We got to buy it, right?
Yeah, but that TV's going to look really good. Got a game coming up this weekend.
Man,
you got to get ready.
I believe you can't have enough TVs, but in the realm of buying businesses, and now there's going to be so many available, it's probably a daunting task to anybody to think, how am I going to decide which one to buy and what do I really want to buy? I don't even know what I want to do. I know a lot of people that, they've got their day job as a CPA or they're an engineer or they're a teacher and they're just like, I could never fathom owning a business. And again, the point here is the Silver Tsunami is dual purpose. You don't have to buy it. You can invest in one. But back to being overwhelmed at the store, I think it's wildly important to know that if you are interested in buying a business or investing in businesses, you need to have your shopping list prepared. You need to have a framework. And we call it the buy box. You need to know what your buy box looks like. We're looking for this kind of business with this kind of revenues, this kind of net incomes, this kind of stability. For some color here, when we're looking at buying businesses, we don't really look at companies that are 2 and 3 years old. We want companies that are 10 years plus, that have proven stable cash flows over enough time that they have been beat up a little bit by the industry or by operational pains and sorrows. So as you create this buy box, you're able to go into the market and take a look at what's out there. Now, James, I'm going to ask you a question because I know that buying businesses is, you're more on the investment side and managing investors and raising funds. Have you ever looked at buying a business before?
I have not, no.
And I had guessed that, so I'm glad I guessed right. But if you were to go buy a business today, where would you start to look? Like, where would you go search?
I mean, probably friends and family. I'd probably call you. I'd call people. That's probably where I would start.
Great.
Just tap into my...
Good answer. Yeah.
Good
answer.
People have called me and asked me that same question. Like, hey, I want to buy a business. What do I do? Right. And I typically tell them to run. Like, just, it's not for everybody. It's not for the weak. Just kidding. I don't tell them to run. But there are, first, if you were to just Google, I want to buy a business, you're going to find lots of platforms out there. Probably the most popular, bizbuysell.com.
Right.
The reason I'm directing our discussion there is if you go to bizbuysell.com today, how many businesses do you think you're going to see for sale on bizbuysell.com?
Thousands.
Yeah, thousands.
100,000, right? Tons of businesses. And it's kind of like buying a car. If you go to, Carvana and you don't tell it, I want a I want this make, I want this year, I want this model, and I want a convertible or whatever your preferences are, you're going to sift through thousands of cars. And days, maybe even weeks later, you probably would have clicked that little heart button by 100 cars. And you're just, no pun intended, spinning your wheels. And now you're overwhelmed with, well, I got 100 companies that I'm looking at. Which one do I really want to buy? And eventually you put it off and you go back to the grind. So creating a buy box is really the key to dialing in how am I going to wade through this tsunami of businesses that are coming available and understanding what I really want and what I really want to go after. But
are there parts of the buy box that are more important than another?
When I think of the buy box, Rich, I immediately go to my calculator, my Excel spreadsheet. And it's all intertwined. If I change this cell up top here, it's going to affect everything below it. But if I had to pick one, the most crucial piece of the buy box, it would have to be that and you could take this a variety of ways, but it has to be that there's enough net income in that business, and it's been proven over years of time that I can afford to make a debt payment, that I can afford to pay myself, and that I have extra cash left over. And if I don't have the ability to make the debt payment or pay myself, and if I don't have a little bit left over to, absorb some blows in the industry or have some extra cash to put back into the business, I would be extremely worried about the deal that I'm getting ready to buy. So I don't really care about the revenue at that point. I don't really care about the capital stack necessarily at that point. It's can I pencil this so that I'm comfortable with the buy?
Interesting.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's really important because when a lot of people think of a buy box or the sandbox they're playing in, they might think, well, all that means is it in manufacturing or is it in a service industry, or what specific part of the service industry are they looking for, right? Their buy box is, I want to do fix and flips. Or what does that mean? Is it, buying fourplexes? Is it duplexes? Is it buying an apartment complex? Is it buying a single family? I mean, there's so many different options, right? And what was interesting is your reply went right to the underlying financial metrics of making a deal even work. You could say you want manufacturing or service or health or tech any day of the week, but if something doesn't pencil, it's over with and you just move on. So I think that makes a lot of sense that at a high level, it's understanding, does this produce enough cash? And then you go even further with, does it match what you're looking for?
I've got a 15-year-old daughter at home, and just 2 days ago, she sent me a car that she's looking at buying. And in our family, we've taught our kids that we'll match you. If you raise or if you save $2,000 and you're ready to go buy a car, then I'll bring $2,000 to the table and we'll go buy a $4,000 car. But the buy box for her looks very different than my buy box. If I'm going to go buy a new vehicle, I mean, I'm already looking at, I want to buy a new truck. I sold my truck last year. I want to buy a new one. I'm being patient, but I would not be looking at the same kinds of vehicles she would be looking at. So the buy box for her immediately moves to, you talked about whether it's manufacturing or tech or even in the real estate space, if it's multifamily or single, rental properties, single family rental properties. The buy box really is indicative of where you are in life and what kind of risk you're ready to take. My 15-year-old sent me a car for, $4,000. And I'm like, she's definitely not, as she's creating the buy box, which is where I think we're headed with this, is her buy box, her creation of the buy box is not looking at 2024, F-150s or Duramax or Dodge Ram, right? She knows that is a realm she can't live in right now. Her buy box is, the 1995, coupe that's got 200,000 miles on it, something that she thinks she can afford. But
it's interesting that you say your daughter has this buy box, you have a different buy box. So what is the difference? Is the difference because of the capacity and cash flow that you're bringing to the table, or knowledge? Or is it, because if all things are equal, let's say she had a good job and she was making money, then what would the difference be?
Well, if she was going to come to the table with $40,000, her buy box, I mean, and I guess to be fair, the box doesn't change. It's the internal function of the box, right? Mm-hmm. So essentially within the buy box, you want to look at what kind of industry you want to be a part of, right? If you've got a background in, this mentor of mine had a background in engineering, but then he jumped into turf. And I imagine there's some kind of a link there that he had, that he felt comfortable getting into an industry that he wasn't totally familiar with. But, my dad has grown up landscaping his entire life. If he's going to go buy a business, he's probably going to go buy a landscape business because that's all he knows. But the box, the innards of the box don't really change. What kind of industry are you looking at? What kind of revenue does it produce, which is what's producing the net income, or the EBITDA that we call it? And what's your risk tolerance? How much money do you have down? How much money do you need to borrow from the bank? Are you qualified to go get a loan at the bank, or do you need to go raise investor dollars? And so back to the analogy of the kid, the box can stay the same. You're just now looking at different, you're looking at a vehicle that's cheaper versus a vehicle that's more expensive. You're looking at a business that does $20,000 in net income versus a business that does $1 million in net income.
Right.
Box is the same. The process is constant.
Would you say the box is tiered, though, on some level? Because as you mentioned, so when you first mentioned buy box, you went to underwriting and sort of the industry, and you brought up more the physical asset. And my mind went straight to, risk reward profile, length of time, length of investment, and overall return threshold that I want to achieve. So I think all these three different things came to our mind. Is it a tiered box, or what's the best way to look at that?
I like that a lot, James. And you could call it tiered. And to be fair, my buy box is 100% mathematical. It's numbers. If the numbers make sense, I'm interested. Now, I have a pretty unique background. I think it's unique. Anybody that looks at my resume is going to ask if I know how to hold down a job, because I've been into so many companies and exited them, under the PE model. But I've been in a lot of different industries that I am confident enough going in and saying, if it makes money, I'll figure it out. I'm not going to break the model that exists. I won't get into surgery. I don't want to get into law. But other than that, man, I'm really not scared. So, but for somebody that's starting out, I imagine that your buy box would absolutely be tiered based on what industries do you want to be a part of? Does it make money? And then, all right, what does that return look like? And if I'm affording all of my debt service and I'm making money and I'm paying down my principals every year and I'm getting more equity, what does my return look like? Both from a distribution standpoint and in 10 years when I want to retire, or maybe they want to hand it off to their son or their daughter. And what does my return look like along the way? So tiered is a great way to look at it, and it is all encompassing. I guess I look at it step by step. To your point, Rich, if it doesn't compute, don't waste time on it. Like, kick it to the curb, which is why that's my first step: is revenue, net income. What's my cost for debt service? Great. Next step: what industry are they in? Is it marketable? Can I scale it? Do I want to be a part of that industry or that world? Yep. And then what kind of money am I making?
Well, I want to pick up where we left off on, like, your daughter and that buy box, right? And the concept of buying an asset versus a liability. What if she's putting $2,000 down on something that would then generate cash flow? That's a completely different scenario.
Game changer.
And then all of a sudden it goes, well, what if she's putting $40,000 down that was something generating revenue that revenue actually paid the payment on the car she wanted?
Right. You instead of going and buying a car for 20 grand cash, you could go put money down on a revenue generating machine.
And then all of a sudden that cash flow then goes towards that liability, and then it changes the buy box of what she's probably thinking of, if it's that scenario. The other part of it is, once the car is paid off, the cash flow continues. The other way around, you buy the car, you're constantly taking money from your pocket and putting it in that expense, and it's gone.
A lot of people are intimidated by buying a business, but they could invest in a business instead and make that money, make that monthly return on their money, get some equity out of the deal that pays for the liability. But then once the liability is paid for, that's now income. You're not buying a business, you're buying a model. You're buying, in this case, a business that is producing revenue based on the internal model or infrastructure of that company. And why is that so important? Why is it important to understand the model that you're purchasing instead of the goods and services that might come with it? It's easy, like in a candy store, to just run in and grab something. I know that I love gummy bears, so I'm going down the gummy aisle, and I'm guilty of buying different varieties of gummy bears because I like to know which one's the best. So therefore, I buy 5 instead of 1. But in a business, if I found a business that was making gummy bears, I'm automatically already interested because I love gummy bears. But what if their model just completely sucked? What if their system was not scalable? Like what if it was, we don't really make the gummy bears, we just have them imported and then we repackage them and we resell them? Well, what are you really buying then? One of my favorite lessons that was deeply impactful was from the founder, the story of McDonald's. And I think his name was Ray Kroc. You know, he came in originally as just supposed to grow franchises, right? And he was going to make something like 1% off of revenue. And I don't remember how much time went by, but he was beginning to get frustrated because he's out there selling franchises and he's not making any money. And a real estate guy, was overhearing one of his conversations, and he just said, "Hey, let's talk." And they have that conversation about, tell me about McDonald's. Yeah, well, we get somebody interested, they buy the land, they build the building, we give them the franchise, right? And the guy looked at him and said, "I don't think you know what business you're in. You're not in the burger business, you're in the real estate business," right? And I've asked that question when I go into a new operation and I meet with my upper management team at that company. I'll ask them, what business are we in? What are we here to do? And they inevitably will say, we're here to distribute plumbing products, or we're here to sell groceries, or we're here to transport people, or we're here to put new asphalt down. And I'm just like, well, that's what we do, but what business are we in, right? And that is a fun conversation to have with your team. If you really dial in, what business are you in, you start to identify the model that you're buying. We're excited about what it does. There's a lot of opportunities of the service that it provides, the product that it provides, but we are more excited about the infrastructure of the company, global distribution, own R&D lab, which when you buy that kind of a model, what are your limits? What are you capped at? It isn't buying, back to the gummy bear analogy, it's not buying gummy bears because I like gummy bears. They have the machine, they have the equipment, they have the distribution network, they have the capacity to not just stay in this space, because we all know that if you're not evolving and adapting, you're going to get left behind. And so
they've got product, brand, distribution, operations.
The model has to be there. So I think that as people look at these opportunities, they continue to be overwhelmed by it, right? There's no way that I could go in and do that. Well, great. The tsunami doesn't have to come by and you not take part in it. There are lots of groups out there that you can invest in.
So talk a little more about the tsunami. So you have this silver tsunami, which means there's all of these businesses that are coming to the point where they're going to be for sale. The reality, what's happening is a lot of these business owners, they've spent their life's work doing this. They don't have a succession plan. A lot of them are just shuttering their doors, closing them out, and walking away.
I actually had that experience a few years ago in 2022. A great friend of mine, we worked together in the church. He came up to me one Sunday and he was like, "Hey, I retired." And I'm like, "Congrats, that's awesome. Like, are you taking a vacation? Are you leaving?" And he was a dentist. And I was like, "Who bought your practice? I mean, is there a transition involved?" And he just said, "No, we just closed the doors." And I actually told, I was like, I apologized. I was like, I feel terrible that I didn't have a chance to like talk to you about what we do and what we could have helped you create with that. And
it was almost like a gut punch when you told me that story. I was like, oh, I feel so bad, because that's so much work, blood, sweat, and tears just to think that's all and not leverage what you built.
The equity that was created in a 40-year span of owning anything, right? There's value there. And you don't have to be, making hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue to be worth something. I mean, you consider a dental practice, it has enterprise value. And there is value there that somebody is interested in taking part in, which will give you a larger parachute when you do decide to retire, right? I feel terrible for those that feel like their only option is to close the doors and walk away. It is wildly evident. Case study after case study proves that there are not enough people that want to take over these companies. That some of the kids don't want to do what mom and dad did. Some people have felt lately that trades are just beneath them, and so that we don't have enough plumbers and electricians coming out of school and trade schools to take over these trades. And so one of my points here is the urgency of this tsunami. I mean, tsunami is something fierce, right? This isn't like, they're not calling it a wave. It is a tsunami. Like, it's going to be impactful. I can't help but tell people how they can go and get involved at business level, whether they own it or whether they invest in it and get a return on it. We're creating this fund where you can invest in an opportunity and own a piece of 10, 20, 30 opportunities out there. You can then take some of those and you can invest in real estate projects, and you can have the opportunity to have this income that's coming at you every month, in addition to the long-term game of owning the equity. And you don't have to have, the pain and the struggle necessarily of trying to own that business and run it and get your arms around it if that's just not what you want to do. Or if that is what you want to do, great. You've got a great opportunity. And if you consider starting a business or buying a business, is there one way that you lean? I'm going to go start a business from scratch, or I'm going to go find one and buy it. Do you have a preference?
Well, I've started lots of businesses. At this point, I want to buy them.
I was going to say, if I could buy it and have the right teams in place and let them, as we've discussed, let them do the work, let them do what they're best at. I mean, I think it would be cool to start my own and kind of be the man on top of the ship. But as we've discussed before, I don't know what I don't know. And so I'd rather have people in those seats potentially. But go with your way.
I think the real answer I would give would be both. I think there's a place for both. I think when there's ideas like impact equity partners, we just started that. That would be starting a new business.
Yeah.
For cash flow and building that. Essentially, you're building your pipeline for your future lifestyle that can withstand itself or continue on as a legacy for generations to come. And so I think there's a combination of both.
I've got a brother-in-law, and he and I debate this a lot. In my 20s, I started from scratch, built companies. But for the last 15 years, I've been about buying businesses and growing them. And he has always started his own. He has never done anything else other than starting from scratch and growing a business, and then he'll sell it, and then he'll start over in something else. And he's been very successful. He's very good at what he does. But we'll debate all the time about which is better. And I agree, Rich, there's room for both, right? There's a place for both. There's a lot of variables, right? Am I in a position that I can hold on long enough to start a business and grow that from scratch until it's producing enough money to pay me? Or do I need something now? I had a friend earlier this year. He was fired from his job. He was given a severance, and he decided he was going to take that severance and buy a business with it. That was going to be his down payment. He was going to get an SBA loan and buy a business because it would replace his income now, because he's got 5 kids at home. What a great vehicle. What a great saving grace for him to have the opportunity to do that. He could not start a business in his current situation. He doesn't have the runway to be able to do that. So there's absolute opportunity for both of these. I love, for obvious reasons, and I'm biased towards buying a business because I really like buying businesses that have been slightly neglected. And the Silver Tsunami is full of these retiring folks. And not all of them are this way, but a lot of them, this has been a lifestyle business. It's been a hobby business. They've not been working in the weeds of the deal because they're enjoying where they're at. They work limited hours. They've got great income. And when somebody who's hungry and tenacious and is in growth mode grabs a hold of an existing customer base, a proven model that works, vendors are already in place, reputation. I mean, you're buying goodwill. When all of that's already intact and you pick up that baton and run with it, you can do a lot more faster with that than you can if you were to just buy it from scratch. Now, I will say, as part of a due diligence effort, I always ask the question, if I was to start this from scratch today, what would it cost me to get to this point? But again, there's a lot of variables, right? And everybody's different. Everybody's at a different phase in their race. But I feel like that vehicle is a wealth machine. And you really just have to identify how you want to be a part of it, whether it's as an investor or whether it's as an owner-operator, and you buy that company. And I've got a buddy who, it's funny, I had no idea he was doing it. He bought a gutter business, and he's been in the mattress world. He's managing a mattress company. They ship them. He doesn't make them. They just ship them. And I'm like, why'd you get into gutters? Like, where'd that come from? And he said, I don't know. I was fixing gutters on my house, and it was pretty stinking easy. And I got a quote to get it done, and they were charging me way too much. And I thought, if I can charge that for doing this, I definitely want to be a part of it. So I bought one. Anyway, so my point was that you don't have to just be the operator. You don't have to go in and own it if you don't choose to. There's lots of opportunities out there, and plenty of groups are positioning themselves to take advantage of this.
What do you look for if you can't do it on your own? If you don't have enough to buy it yourself, all a syndication is just creating a way for, friends and family and others in your network to join you in that effort of buying that business. I mean, that's ultimately what.
Yeah, and again, if you want to own it, then there's ways to do that through friends and family. If you would rather be more on the passive side and just invest in it, mm-hmm. then that would look a little bit differently. I know that there's lots of lenders out there that are doing their best to position themselves to lend for those companies that are coming for sale. You just have to be able to be prepared to give up some. You got to give a blood draw, and you got to be prepared to give off the firstborn. And
I think it comes down to, are you wanting, as an investor, are you wanting to buy a job and go into it where you're buying a business and going in and actually having to run it? Are you buying the business because you want the business to run when you're not around or don't have anything to do with it? And I think it comes down to that freedom of purpose. What's really important? Do you want to free up your time and have your resources work for you? Then that's most likely going to be a syndication with teams that do a really good job at managing it for you.
It makes me think of what you said, James. You mentioned that you'd be interested in doing that if the right teams were in place, right? Because, and again, you humbly said, because I don't know what I don't know. And if you had the right people there, it kind of tells me that, it shows me you're not afraid of hard work, you're not afraid to learn, but you're also not careless, in your investments, and you're not careless with the decisions you make there. And so, again, Rich, I think it absolutely comes back to who's going to be in your corner and around the table. If you wanted to get involved in investing in companies, there are lots and lots of ways to do that. There's lots of financial advisors that are prepared to put your money to work for you. Obviously, that's something that we do, and if it's not a fit for us, I'd be happy to help you find the right fit, as would we all.
I was going to say, actually, is there a difference, you think, in the personality traits of a person that should buy something versus just be an investor? Like, what kind of profiles?
The right kind of person that would be more successful in buying and running their own business are people that typically break the rules. They don't really get good grades. They're high risk takers. They're typically like the ones that are breaking the law. And I'm not talking like they're criminals, but I mean like they speed, they stay out after hours, and
no means nothing to them.
They bend the rules, right? Which there is a book out there called First Break All the Rules, and it's a really good book. Versus, the investor is probably more on the side of very tempered and very disciplined, and the kind of person that has a very defined, I'm going to keep my colors in the lines. And I don't mean any of that to either side negatively. It's just, I've got siblings, there's 5 boys in my family, and all of us are entrepreneurial, spirited boys. My sisters are not. My one sister was a teacher. In fact, both my sisters were teachers. and then my other sister worked at Target. And it's funny to me to watch the difference, because as I think back on what this lady this morning said, that's kind of how our personalities are. Like my parents knew that they couldn't really give me too many guardrails. I was going to find a way around them. I remember a time, I don't know why this comes to my mind. I remember a time back on my mission, when I served a 2-year mission for the church. There's some pretty strict rules. And when you're in a foreign country and you're by yourself, or you've got you and your companion that you're running with, they want you to be very obedient. They want you to live those rules very, very strictly. And we were supposed to be home at 9:30, and we were out late. We were teaching this family, and I'm not the guy that is going to stand up at 9:15 because home's 15 minutes away. I'm going to finish the discussion. People are more important to me than the 9:30 rule. And plus, I had been out almost 2 years, so I felt like I had a little bit of latitude there to make that decision. My companion got up and ran. At 9:15, he got up and left. And the only way I could stop him was to remind him, you're not allowed to leave me by myself with anybody else. We're supposed to be together most of the time. So he stopped, in the middle of the road, and he turned around and he shrugged his shoulders, and he came back and he sat and waited for me to finish the lesson. And funny enough, that guy is now a mortgage broker for homes. And I've often considered business as kind of like the Wild West. And as we go through deals, there isn't really, people always ask, what's the blueprint? Give me the blueprint and I'll follow it. And there's not a blueprint. There's a model that you can follow, but within that model, how many veins are there to structuring a deal, which will be a future podcast?
Well, I think it comes down to, how would you build a skyscraper without a blueprint?
No.
So the structure actually gives the blueprint of bringing all the finance, legal, and operations into play so that your acquisition actually works.
Exactly. And you're totally right. And then when you get into building the skyscraper and you're following the blueprint, does the blueprint tell you like how the weld has to go together, or what nuts and bolts, or what redhead to put into the cement? Or do you kind of figure some of that out as you go?
Wow, that's good. As you go.
I think that craftsman, right? That word craftsman is intentional, because I get it. I get the walls got to be plumb. They got to be, 8 foot off center. The pitch has to be a certain way. But then they get into it and they're like, well, that board is warped, or, the ground here is soft, and they got to dig the ground and pack it. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of craftiness and shiftiness in business ownership and acquisition. And so absolutely, the blueprint's important, 100%. I'm not giving any less importance to that.
All I'm saying is, in the world of chaos, when you have to break the rules to get into all the businesses, right? You can apply structure in how you put it together, is all I'm saying.
You have to, right? And that goes back to the box. That goes back to the buy box and how that works. But the thing that does excite me about this Silver Tsunami is it is going to feed those people that can be crafty, and they look at alternative forms of investment. You're going to have to structure a deal with that seller that is not, 4 years ago, right after COVID, when money was just cheap, you could borrow money at like 1%. You were buying businesses 100%. No seller carry, no earn out, and it was all based on 1 year's performance, not 3 or 4, because the money was so cheap. It afforded them to do that. Well, now you're not going to find a deal very often that doesn't include some kind of seller financing, and so you get to be creative and you get to be shifty in how you follow the blueprint, but executing that blueprint along the way is going to be the fun part. So kind of summarizing all of it up, it's the Silver Tsunami. It looks intimidating. It feels intimidating. I'm the guy that's running out to the ocean with my surfboard and can't wait to ride this wave because it's exciting. There's so much opportunity built in it. And truthfully, I know that we all feel this. We want to bring as many people into it that will benefit from it. And that's our ultimate goal. And so don't be afraid of it. Talk to the right advisory group, whether that's you want to buy one and own it, or whether you want to be an investor in it. That wave is going to be a vehicle that will make a lot of people wealthy when you follow the right blueprints and, executing those processes along the way. So
love it.
Anything else you guys had to add?
Well said, Jason.
I don't think so, no.
If you guys are currently riding that Silver Tsunami, if you've got your surfboard under you, we'd love to hear about how it's going, what opportunities you've found, and how you're being creative with it. But like this message, subscribe to our channel, share this with your friends. But this is going to be a wild time, and we look forward to sharing it with you. So with that, we'll close out. Thanks, guys.